Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of SoundBytes, the newest live virtual series from WDAV, Classical Public Radio. Hi there, I'm Myleta Melton, your afternoon host on Classical Public Radio. This series is all about the joy of experiencing and making music together, whether it's in a concert hall or on a computer screen. Today, we're going to dive into the phenomenon of the virtual choir. It is one of the hottest things taking off now on the internet. Since the beginning of COVID-19 and the shutdowns, we've seen more and more ensembles around the world coming together virtually to produce magnificent choral music from isolated recordings of each individual member. And as you can imagine, it's a huge undertaking to put one of these very intricate videos together. And our guests today are definitely very familiar and experts with that challenge, and they've done just spectacular work with their own ensembles. So we're going to be thrilled to share some examples of that hard work with you, and it's going to blow you away. Just believe me, you better get some handkerchiefs and get some Kleenex with you, because these are some of the most powerful videos that I've ever seen. And it's just thrilling to be able to share those with you on today's first Soundbite. So please, everybody, let's give a very warm welcome to David Tang of the Firebird Arts Alliance, composer Eric Banks, who is joining us from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Yeah, I said Brazil. And also Selena Brockington, who is the choral director with the Rock Hill School District and has tons of experience in performing with virtual choir. So it's going to be wonderful to talk to each of you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, David, we're going to start with one of your videos. So talk a little bit about the Charlotte Community Virtual Choir and that project.
Well, when COVID-19 hit, I was scrambling to figure out what to do with all my choirs. And, early on, it was determined that choir singers are super spreaders. There was a choir in Washington State where one COVID-19 person infected the entire choir during a rehearsal, and so it was soon figured out that choirs wouldn't get to sing together for quite a long time. And so I had known about virtual choirs and decided it was time for me to learn the audio editing and mixing and the video editing and mixing to do these. And so I gave myself about 3 weeks and picked You Do Not Walk Alone by Elaine Hagenberg as a piece, because it really spoke to me and my singers as something that was appropriate for the crisis in which we found ourselves in, being alone, being isolated, and sending out a message that you do not walk alone. So it took about 3 weeks to do, and I guess you're going to see what happened.
It is. It's a wonderful piece of music. We did play that during the afternoon this week on Classical Public Radio to kind of whet everybody's appetite. But I tell you, it's different watching the video to go along with it. So let's see the first video, You Do Not Walk Alone, with David Tang leading the Charlotte Community Virtual Choir.
When the
That is definitely some of the most powerful music with video to go along with it. And I would really, like Frank Dominguez, I was really glad that I had an opportunity to see that in advance, because I would be here just sobbing, because it just brings up so much emotion. What can you tell us about the composer? Tell about Elaine and your relationship with her, David?
Elaine is young and sort of hopping, especially in the church music scene. She writes beautiful music like that, and is really growing in terms of popularity. And we actually struck up a relationship over this video, because when you make these videos, one has to get permission, and oftentimes have to pay money to create these virtual things. And she generously gave us permission to make the video without charging us. And in fact, her publisher is waiving all fees at the moment for
That's
people who are making these virtual choirs, for any of their music. So, and she actually said hello to everybody by we emailed back and forth this morning, and she said hi to everyone. So
Well, hello back, and thank you so much for, and I'm sure she's watching, so thank you so much for the opportunity to share that music. And you learned to edit that together in 3 weeks?
yeah, well, the singers had about 10 days to send in their submissions, and then I took about a week to mix it and edit it. So,
What
and
guidelines?
I'm sorry.
What guidelines did you give the performers when they sang for their recording?
um not enough. But I told them to film themselves horizontally rather than vertically. So and otherwise, in that video, everybody used two devices. So one device, they were listening to the music, and then the other device was filming them to sing, and then they just send in their videos. And then you have to rip the audio off the video, mix it into something that sounds as good as it can, and then you have to synchronize that back all with their faces, and then you have to add other stuff that you wanted to add. And I asked the singers to send in pictures of the people that they loved, that they were missing during the crisis, so that there would be a special message to those people. And folks sent in things. One singer sent in a photo of an in-law who was really struggling with isolation. Just, she felt very much alone and completely isolated, and nobody was visiting her because no one could. And so when this in-law saw the video, was just moved to tears and just felt less alone. And then some of the other photos were available from Getty Images and that sort of thing. So
The photography and the photos that you selected to go along with that send a very powerful message, particularly now that we are all very isolated and still trying to reach out. And that's one of the things that I want to share with you from Alina McNichol, who's also is on that video. From Opera Carolina, she says that she really does appreciate the opportunity to have that continued connection with you and with music. And I think that it really does, it fills a hole in everybody's heart, particularly if you're a performer.
yeah, yeah.
Well, Eric, let's move on and talk about At All Times. Talk about the words first, and where they came from and how you selected them.
Okay. I was commissioned to write this piece about 4 years ago by a group in San Francisco named Clear Story, that's led by my friend Justin Montaigne. And they were doing a concert on the theme of light. And they wanted a very, very short piece. And they're actually just an octet of singers. Mm. So it's written with the idea that it's one on a part, because it's an 8-part piece. And they're a group that's kind of like alumni of Chanticleer, the group in San Francisco, the very famous chorus here in the States. Many of them have sung for many years in Chanticleer. So they have male sopranos and altos, as well as tenors and basses. And the piece, the text of the piece is by the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso. And this particular text really spoke to me, and it's kind of a list of things that I would aspire to be, in a spiritual sense. So I wrote it then in 2016, and it was premiered. And then the Esoterics, my choir in Seattle. I don't live in Sao Paulo, just by the way. I do have a home in Seattle, but we could talk about that while I'm here at another time. But so I performed the piece with my choir in late in the year of 2019. And it was one of the last pieces that we performed before COVID hit Seattle. And I know some of the members of the choir that David talked about earlier that was struck by COVID-19 outside of Seattle. So my choir sang this piece, and it was in their recent memory, and I decided to try to put together a video of us singing it. My choir is a chamber choir. It's only around 32 people, but the roster is larger than that because people come and go because of work and different schedules. And when I put out the call for this particular virtual choir video, I also asked the Esoterics diaspora. So I asked for singers that were located all over the world that had sung in the group before. And there are 64 singers in this video, and they're little tiny squares. And there are 16 of them that recorded and sent their music in, a quarter of the group that were not in Seattle. So one of the coolest things about virtual choirs is that you don't have to be located within a 10-mile radius. You could put a choir together of anybody. So this is our first, Esoteric's first virtual choir video. It was not edited by me. I am learning the software now to make our second video, but it was edited by Michael Saunders and Kylie Della. So I want to give a shout out to them.
Incredible.
My singers.
Incredible work. Now, because you are in Sao Paulo, we'll come back to this after we see the video. I'm hoping you're going to tell me that those trips to the Amazon were to study some indigenous instruments, being the ethnomusicologist. And
I'll answer later.
Okay.
You're partially right.
We have so many comments that have come in all about how uplifting the music is and how beautiful the video is. And I think that's the best way to segue into the Esoterics and at all times. May I become, may I become.
Protector.
What an amazing edit and some incredible music to go along with it. Eric, how do you choose the text that you use as a vehicle for your music?
Well, I mean, I was really interested in choosing something that spoke universally. And I often look to people like the Dalai Lama. I'm Buddhist, so he speaks to me personally, but I don't know. I mean, I think we all, it's a matter of taste, right? We all find texts that are beautiful in one way or another. But I don't think that has to do with religion. I think that that text would speak to anyone, right? And I'm sorry that the video has the text on the last slide. So after the singers' names, you can read the text, but it's a good text for choral diction if everyone understood the texts.
I just thought from the content of it, and I had to print it. That's what I'm showing you. That it was
okay.
I had to print it because it was something that I thought I want to read this every day. It's something that I would strive to be every day. I think it makes you a better person when you think about, may I find hope in the darkest of days and focus in the brightest. If you start your day with some kind of an affirmation like that, you know you're setting the stage for something to be even better. Okay, so now, knowing that you're Buddhist and you selected this passage from the Dalai Lama, and knowing that, I mean, I have Buddhist friends and everyone chants, I'm wondering if that kind of last chorus, that is that one of the natural chords that just kind of picks the natural rhythm of your heart? Because it just seemed like it grabbed right into my soul, and it felt like it was such a natural chord progression.
Well, I mean, again, I think text speaks to everyone differently. I mean, music does too. And I'm glad that it did. I'm glad it had that effect on you. It's interesting that you juxtapose the idea of Om with rhythm, because I think that Om is rhythmless, right? I think that most of the time when we sing Om, it's supposed to be held as long as a breath is. And all of the rhythms that we have in the world are much faster than that. But maybe it's the rhythm at which the world breathes. Who knows? Who knows?
Well, and I just wanted to mention that Eric, to me, is one of the best selectors of texts. He reads constantly, and he's always searching for meaningful texts, and all of his music has profound texts. And I'm glad we were able to share that piece, and it's beautiful text, and you can find it on YouTube, and the entire text is in the description of the YouTube video. So just look for At All Times Esoterics, and you'll see the whole text.
Now, talking about the virtual choir, I mean, one thing that hearing both of these, You Do Not Walk Alone and Adult, one time was not enough. And you can't go back into the concert hall unless you got tickets for the entire run of the show to be able to see that more than once. Having the virtual choir and having the performance in a more permanent form allows us to be able to appreciate it and see different nuances and different things every single time that we see it, every time we hear it. Do you think about those things as you watch it and edit it over and over and over again?
Posterity? Like, it's interesting because we actually live streamed the Esoterics concert when we performed it in an acoustic setting. And I go back and forth between listening to, the Esoterics in concert singing At All Times and the virtual choir video. And I mean, there are things that I like about both. I think the blending of voices in a natural acoustic and the seeing people standing together, even though they're further away, is heartening. But when I watch the concert, I also looking at myself conducting, which is never a good thing, and I don't want to see it. And then it's a distraction, right? So what I love, you intimated this earlier, Marlita, but what I love about the virtual choir video is that you can see all of the singers really close up. You can see them emote. You can see, you could see how a bunch of hippies my choir is compared to Dave's choir. But you could see like the personality in the faces, and what the music means to them. And you can't see that as an audience member in a standard choral concert. The audience is too far away from the singers. So there are benefits to both. And obviously, as any control freak, I mean, you love the idea of editing everyone, making them sound their best before it can go out to the world. But you know, it's you either do that in rehearsal with a real human person, or they send themselves to you and you edit them without them knowing.
And it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in terms of longevity and how well you like what you do. And the great thing about virtual choirs is that you can always redo them. So you can take all the singers and put them in totally different places. And there are singers, for instance, who were doing interesting things during You Do Not Walk Alone, where next time around, I'd want to bring their faces out further, so that you would see more of their face individually because of how expressive they were. And in the last video that you'll see, there are especially some people that I would have loved to have showcased more in a way that you can't even come close to in a live performance. So there's always the option to do it again.
Take 2 or more.
Or more.
Let's kind of segue over to Selena as performer here among us. How do you prep for a virtual choir audition?
Well, the funny thing is, with virtual choirs, there's rarely an audition process. The cool thing is you actually, you say, hey, I want to do it. You learn the music yourself, you record it, and you send it in. And the wonderful people who edit it on the other side make you sound amazing, regardless of how you sounded when you sent it in. That's the wonderful thing I do love about virtual choirs. I will say the experiences that I've managed to glean from this is amazing, because I've always been a performer. I've been a performer for years. But to be able to see and hear what I specifically look like in relation to everybody else and by myself makes a huge difference. It makes me a better performer, I think.
What is it? Can you tell a difference between like what you do with, say, is there a difference between virtual choirs is what I'm saying? What was it? Was it different working with Eric Whitaker than it is working with David Tang?
Absolutely.
I mean, giants.
The biggest difference I would say is what is expected from the music. So depending on the piece that you're singing determines how you do what you do, I think. Like I've had the opportunity to participate with Eric Whitaker, and there are some things that I naturally do with my voice that I had to not do because he didn't want that in the recordings. Like for instance, he's very big on controlling vibrato. So he likes a lot of straight tones more than anything else. And a lot of his music just has a lot of vowels and very few consonants. And it makes a difference, from what I'm told, it makes a difference on the editing end, whether it's easier or more difficult if there are fewer consonants. But to me, it seemed like it was easier for me to do the less consonants because I wasn't as concerned about where I cut off, where I put this T, where I put this S, and things like that. It was just easier to end on an ah, and if I ran out of air, I just stop, but keep my mouth open, and you'd still think I was singing.
And then cut. So
exactly.
Since we're going to see one of your performances coming up in the next video, My Country 'Tis of Thee, I want to ask David to talk a little bit about Dan Forrest, who arranged this version of it. Let's give Dan's propers here as well, since he's been so gracious about allowing us to use this video for the first SoundBytes.
Well, Dan is one of the leading American choral composers today. He has written everything from small church anthems to large scale, full concert length works. He wrote a Requiem for the Living, I think it's called, that's just incredible. He is highly sought after and commissioned and incredibly gracious. He lives in Greenville, I think, North Carolina or South Carolina. He lives close to Charlotte, and was gracious enough to allow us to use this piece. And it was funny happenstance how this occurred, because WBTV called after they had seen You Do Not Walk Alone and said, "Can you do something for Memorial Day?" And I said, "Well, that's 2 weeks out. It took me a month to do this last one. What would you like?" And they said, "Well, we actually needed a week ahead." So I had 5 days, 6 days to turn this one around. And so it was a bit of a challenge, but because it was such a short turnaround, I had to find someone who could give me permission quickly. And so through connections, I was able to get to Dan quickly enough for him to say, "Okay, go ahead and use my piece."
Are you saying you pull some strings?
Yeah. and then he also said, "Well, there's a recording of an accompaniment track that my publisher is going to put out of a concert, a symphonic band, wind ensemble playing the accompaniment. Do you want to use that? It's a rough mix as a sort of, it was a trial thing." And so he sent that to me. And so we have a full symphonic band behind us in My Country 'Tis of Thee.
Well, and it's a wonderful thing. Selena, anything you want to say about the performance before we go to the video tape?
I absolutely loved doing this one. One thing about virtual choirs is being a singer for most of my life, I was able to come back to that. And that was really missed in these first few months of being in isolation, and being able to just see and sing with the people that I love to hang around with on a regular basis was amazing.
Well, all right, let's enjoy My Country 'Tis of Thee, arranged by Dan Forrest. That's just purely amazing. How do you feel when you watch that, Selena? Does it give you goosebumps every time?
Every time, every single time I watch that video, I get goosebumps. And then, of course, I think about what I did wrong.
um, and I just wanted to mention a couple shout outs. There are a number of choir directors in that who sent the invitation to their singers. And so there are high school kids in there. There are people from Philadelphia and from California and from Alaska. And Eric is actually in there singing from a corner of his apartment in Sao Paulo. And he's the lead tenor voice that you hear.
Cool.
And so it was a real community effort, since the singers only had 2.5 days to turn in their videos. So it was extremely exciting, and great colleagues here in Charlotte and around the country really stepped up and got their singers to send in stuff.
I've got a couple of questions and things that have come in from the audience that's watching on Facebook, and one of those is directed at Selena and the school year that's right around the corner from us. And, how do you think that COVID-19 and restrictions are going to affect you in the classroom? What do you see coming up?
Honestly, we still have no idea. Everything is pointing towards there being very limited in-person grouping. So with a choir that at times has been as big as 200 members, I'm not sure what we're going to do right now. We're waiting for guidance from our districts. We've received some guidance from different singing and directing organizations, and putting the two together. Outside rehearsal is the best option, but being that we're going into the fall and winter, that may not be a good idea. So we're sort of just waiting to see and talking with health officials to see what the best course of action is going to be.
Selena, did you all of a sudden just have to come up with a design for online music classes out like that?
Absolutely. I literally had, if I remember correctly, I had a week. And
a week?
A week to go from in-person everyday class to online something for the kids. And I was like, oh, okay. And I mean, really, that's what it felt like. That's what it felt like. It was like, and you couldn't just stop. You couldn't say, well, no, I'm not going to do it. We had a responsibility to our parents and our students, and I had to do what I had to do.
So at least now you've kind of got your feet wet, so you'll be ready to forge ahead with those online classes if that's the need coming up in the fall?
I will be better prepared. I'm going to say that. I am nowhere near an expert, but I will be better prepared than I was in March to make that move if necessary.
But David, I want to talk to you, since one of the things that you're up to with the consortium is training other choir directors and working in that area to help people learn how to make performances happen with their virtual choirs. What's that like going for you? How did that get started?
Well, in thinking purely selfishly about what I would do with my groups and what my groups would do, I realized that, I can make a virtual choir now, and lots of my friends and colleagues are like, well, I made a virtual choir. And then my next question was, how many of those are you going to make next year? Because Vox sings 50 pieces a year. There's no way I'm making 50 virtual choirs in a year. So how can we help each other in ways that give our singers opportunities to continue singing to the extent that they've been singing, given that our bandwidth is limited? And so this idea of collecting a bunch of conductors and composers together to create a website where people can post their projects and singers from around the world can come and participate. When I'm in the middle of making a virtual choir of something, I can tell Vox singers, hey, go find something you want to sing. And high school teachers and middle school teachers and college teachers can say, hey, go sing something. And so, for instance, I have a colleague who is at a small HBCU nearby who had as a goal for his singers to teach them the Hallelujah Chorus. If they did nothing else next year, they were going to sing the Hallelujah Chorus. And I said, well, what if they could learn to sing the Hallelujah Chorus with a Baroque orchestra conducted by Scott Allen Jarrett of the Bach Academy Charlotte? Whoa. And, they can send in their tracks and you can hear what they did and give them a grade. And you can make a virtual choir with hundreds of people, or you can have us do one with just your singers and Scott and the orchestra. So there's a whole bunch of possibilities. And one of the things that became evident really quickly was that there was an issue of inequity. So people with big budgets who have access to lots of tech could create one of these every 2 weeks. But people without the technology and people without the resources and people without the know-how would struggle to do these things. So this consortium is also very much about training. Teaching people how to do these things using free software. We're working to find ways to get technology to folks who may not be able to afford the hardware. So we want to get them the hardware and the software and the knowledge. We're going to have online training sessions where an audio engineer mixes a virtual choir while people watch on Zoom and can ask questions live. So it's very much a moment in time where, given our racial unrest and our increasing awareness of social inequity and racial inequity, that this is an opportunity for choral musicians around the world to do something about it. And for instance, we're in discussions with Tim Sharp at ACDA about doing a Beethoven Mass in C with the full orchestra and soloists, with him directing it, and where singers who would never otherwise get a chance to sing the Beethoven Mass in C will get to sing it with Tim Sharp and a professional symphony orchestra. And so there are opportunities that people wouldn't be able to have otherwise. So it all came out of this desire to make this thing more accessible and make it available to more people to do. And if you don't mind, another part of what we're doing is creating a series of gospel virtual choirs and gospel choirs about spirituals. So, and they'll be carefully curated by some of the members of the consortium, and we'll be able to teach someone from Sweden the racial history behind where our spiritual comes from, and what it means to actually sing gospel. When you sing gospel, it's not about the notes and the words; it's about worshiping God. And so, we've all, well, a lot of us have seen movies or YouTube videos of Japanese people singing gospel, and it just doesn't quite work. But the hope is that if they get to do a virtual choir with some of the gospel superstars that Selena and I and other people in Charlotte know, they'll be able to sing it more authentically and truthfully. And I think that's another potential benefit from this horrible situation.
You sing from the heart instead of the head. Eric, I've got a question for you. We've had a comment come in from someone who must be a friend of yours named David Coffey, who says that the video that we saw of At All Times is the spark that lit a fire in him as a part of the esoterics. And I see from your note, you're doing a happy hour with them. Is it every week? And is it that happy?
Yeah. Well, it's pretty happy.
Are you live streaming it?
No. It's a happy hour for members of the group. So David came back to the group. He lives in California, and the group is in Seattle, so he's a member of the diaspora. That's what I'm calling it. We normally rehearse for 6 hours a week. Sunday nights is one of those times. But we've had every Sunday night since COVID-19. Had an hour and a half long happy hour. I guess it's an happy hour and a half. on Sunday nights. And David is a frequent guest because he lives in Sacramento and is a church musician and doesn't have a community chorus that he's a member of anymore. So he feels like we're family, and we are in a way. So whenever you're in a choir for a long time, and he's a founding member of my choir, which is 27 years old, it's a big deal to be a founding member and to have that connection over that many years. So, but it's fun. There is drinking. There's not drinking together, but there's drinking at happy hour. I have some wine over there that I open up, and I can't drink during rehearsal when we're together. So it's a benefit. Right.
So it's like we do on our Friday afternoon 5 o'clock virtual small batch. We imbibe in place, as it were. So I hope that you'll let us know when you do release more videos. We'll have to subscribe to your YouTube channels for everybody. So please, all of you, keep us well up to date with everything that's going on in your world, whether it's in schools or in performances with the consortium. That is just dynamic. I think it's going to be so fun to watch. I'd love to be a fly on the shoulder of whoever edits those videos to pick up a little tip or two, because that's I just think that is really hard work. So I just want to thank you all again for being here, and see if there's any last comments that you'd like to make before I wrap it up.
If people want to stay in touch with what's going on with the Virtual Choir Consortium, we have a Facebook page, Virtual Choir Hub. And if you look for Virtual Choir Hub on YouTube, you will also find videos that we curate and put up there as well.
Super.
Yeah.
Eric, anything new?
ericbanks.com.
Wait. Tell us about your next your next virtual choir.
The one I'm working on right now?
Yeah.
Oh God. So Dave and I were in college together, and we were both members of a cappella groups that did lots of pop music. And this is in the late 80s when rocks were soft. So I, in the middle of this pandemic, I decided to go back to what got me interested in choral music in the beginning, and that was arranging pop music. So I have done an a cappella arrangement of the Dua Lipa song, Don't Start Now. And I changed a few of the words for if you don't want to see me dancing with somebody, don't come out. So it's a very good quarantine song. Stay home. So I'm in the middle of editing it now, and probably in a week or two I'll have a video for you. It's going to be hilarious.
Oh, it's going to be fun. It's like Eric Banks' Adventures in Brazil, part 1.
It's not much of an adventure to sit for 50 hours and edit, singers one at a time. But you can't go anywhere here anyway.
So you may as well just edit and practice and perform.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to all of you, Selena, David, and Eric, for joining us for this first episode of SoundBytes. And do come back to our Facebook page this Friday, June 26th at 5 for another virtual small batch concert. And this time it features the Bayo String Quartet as part of their annual residency at the Charlotte New Music Festival, which has moved to an online format this year. Frank Dominguez will be hosting that at 5 p.m. on Friday. They are going to present a program that's entirely made up of new work, so this is one that you definitely don't want to miss. And you can find a link to the Facebook event in the comments section below during this live stream event. And I also want to mention to you that we have a new service now at Classical Public Radio. You're going to love it because you never have to miss a date with your classical companion. If you didn't catch Biscuits and Bach on Sunday, or real music on Saturday, or night music, you want to hear night music in the middle of the afternoon, now you can do that because of WDAV's new streaming archive, where you can hear programs or hosts that you might have missed And they are available to you for a limited time. It's very simple to get to. Just go to wdav.org/archive and click on the program or the host that you want to hear. So thanks all of you for being here, and all of you in virtual Facebook land. Thanks all of you for being here. I'll see you again soon, and I hope you'll join me again this afternoon at 3 when I bring you lots of classical music. We're going to start out with a pause for reflection piece at 3 this afternoon. So come back and join me again. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.